The first to bring you the hottest DJ gear on the planet. You're watching coverage of Winter NAMM 2013. We are agiprodj.com.
Hello there, everybody. I'm Rick from AGI Pro DJ, and we're with Dennis DeSantis, head of documentation with Ableton. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks, Rick.
We've got an exciting product. I'm not really an Ableton guy, but I've heard about this push device that's coming, and I'm excited to hear what it can do and why it's here. And without further ado, here's an overview of Ableton Push.
So Ableton Push is our new instrument, and we wanted an instrument that you could play and that would give you a chance to do everything that you need to do to make new music from scratch without having to deal with a computer at all. So we figured out what the workflows were that we wanted to be able to accomplish using an instrument like this for modern music production. You want to be able to create beats by real-time playing or step sequencing. You want to be able to play melodies and harmonies. You want to be able to control the parameters of the sounds that you're working on, make changes to the sounds over time. And you want to be able to organize all of that into loops that you can combine and mix and match in various ways so that you can start to structure a song as you're working. So the pad grid is the sort of centerpiece of Ableton Push, and the idea is that this grid updates dynamically without you thinking about it, depending on what kind of instrument you're playing at a given time. So currently you're looking at how Push looks when it's playing drums. And the bottom left 16 pads are for real-time playing. They're kind of the classic 16 pad real-time playing environment that you know from every drum machine. These 16 pads are for setting the length of the loop that you're working on. So each pad here corresponds to one bar, and you can press and hold a pad and then press another pad to say I want to make a 4-bar loop or a 2-bar loop. These 4 rows of pads are a step sequencer, and you set the resolution of the steps in the step sequencer using this column of buttons here. So it's currently set to 16th notes, so each pad represents 1/16th note. And the last pad that you play in the real-time section determines what it is that you're step sequencing. So I'm going to step sequence some 8th notes now. So I just plug in offbeat or onbeat 16th notes here, and I automatically have this moving green playhead which shows me where I am in the clip. I can turn a metronome on if I want to, but I don't really need to since I already have the hi-hats, and then I can overdub in real time. And that'll loop. So if it was a little sloppy, I can go in and quantize it. I can hold down our quantize button here, and let's say I want to quantize that to about 75% 16th notes. So it's somewhere between completely on the grid and where I played it originally. I press the quantize button again to apply that to the stuff that I just played. So step sequencing and real-time recording at the same time. We also have a note repeat mode. So if I press this repeat button, now if I hold a pad down, it repeats at the rate determined by this button, anywhere from 30-second triplets down to quarter notes. You'll notice these pads are also pressure sensitive. So as I lean in to the pad, it gets louder. I can do real-time swing for this repeated note too. So this encoder determines the amount of swing. If I dial this up, I get really exaggerated swing, and then if I bring it back down, I can get a light swing. And then I can overdub this. So I have a swung, repeat note recording, real-time recording, and step sequencing all on the same pad grid at the same time. So that's how we work with drums. Now if I move to a new track, I have a piano loaded on that track. I just press this cursor button, and now turn repeat mode off. The pad grid is set up for playing pitches. There's sort of 2 fundamental ways we deal with inputting pitches on this instrument. In this mode, every note on the pad grid is in the key that we're currently playing in, which is set by these green buttons here and these 2 yellow buttons here, which determine the type of scale. So we're currently in C major. If I switch now to a chromatic mode, now we have all of the chromatic notes available. It's like taking a piano and folding it into this pad grid. So here we have lit and unlit pads. The blue pads are the Cs, they're the key that we're in. The white pads are the other notes in the scale, and the unlit pads are the notes that aren't in the scale, the black keys in the case of C major. So we move to the right by half steps and up in fourths. So if I want to play a chromatic melody like the head to giant steps, for example, that's fine. It took me a little while to learn that on push, just like it would on any other instrument. But what doesn't take any additional time now is transposing that to a new place. If I wanted to transpose a melody that I learned that was very chromatic like that on a piano, I would have to completely rework fingerings, right? So you have different combinations of black and white keys. On push, because the pad grid is totally symmetrical, I just have to shift to a new position. So everything that you play on the pad grid here is position based. So to play that a whole step higher, I just move over 2 pads, so I've moved up a whole step now, and then play the same fingering I played before. So once you learn a pattern, you know that pattern automatically in any number of keys. And that's just in the chromatic mode. If I switch to the in-key mode, all of the non-diatonic notes are gone now. The pads are just the notes that are in the key we're in. So I move by scale degrees to the right and still up in fourths. So I can play a scale really easily. I can play 3 notes to the right and then up. And now I can play triads using 1 fingering as well, and I can move that fingering anywhere I want on the keyboard. So once you learn the pattern for a scale or a triad or something, it's all automatically movable everywhere. Now the pattern for a scale is the same for any other scale. If I want to switch now to E Mixolydian, I just press the E button, change the scale type here, and play the same pattern. So that's an introduction to how you get around playing melodies and harmonies. Now let me get a different sound. I press our browse button here, and I'm now, the encoders at the top and the display are showing me the contents of the sounds that I have available. It turns into a browser. So I can use this encoder to select a new type of sound, this encoder to dial in the exact sound that I want, and press this green button to load it. And now I'm playing a new sound. So switching back to our device mode, these encoders are now letting me control parameters for the sound. And if I want to record a new pattern now, I can just press the play button to start playback of the clip. I know that I want it to be 2 bars long, so I'll set fixed length recording mode to 2 bars. And when that's on, every loop that I make now will be exactly the same length as the drum clip that I had before. So I start playback by pushing the play button. When I want to punch in, I just press the record button. Maybe I quantize that again to 75%. Maybe I want to record some parameter automation now, so I switch back to these controls, and since I'm still recording, any changes that I make to these encoders will be captured as part of the loop. And because these are touch encoders, I can tap the top of one, and it shows the scaling from 0 to 100%. The number values are always visible for these, but I can also see it sort of scaling as I touch one encoder. So now this sound is also changing over time. Turn record off, switch to a track that has a bass line or a bass sound on it, and record a new bass part. Quantize that, maybe capture some parameter automation for that. Out, and I could create additional patterns and variations of all this stuff. So now I'm going to move out of our note mode, where everything you've seen so far has been controlling notes, and now the pad grid is sort of blown up, and instead of each pad representing 1 note, it represents the entire pattern. So now I can start and stop a whole loop by pressing one of these pads. That'll start the drum loop at the beginning of the next bar. the beginning of the next bar now, the bass line will start, or I can fire them all together by pressing these scene launch buttons at the side. I can stop one by pressing an empty clip slot. So this layout is very much like live session view, because what we've been doing the whole time is creating clips in live session view, and now finally I can turn to my computer and you can see everything we've done so far has been capturing into live. So the idea with push and live, the relationship between the two is you start here, you have a new musical idea, you can play without having to think about sequencer software or using your mouse, or the kind of things that you get into when you're working with a mouse can be really tedious and uncreative. And here you're just playing. You've got your hands on an instrument. You're finding interesting patterns and combinations, and everything you do gets captured. When you're done with that process and it's time to start editing and arranging, 3/4 of the work is already done for you in Ableton Live, and then you come over here and do the kind of detailed things that Live is really good at: editing, mixing, turning the stuff in live session view into an arrangement along the timeline. So that's a pretty basic introduction to what you can do with Ableton Push, and then finally in Ableton Live. Thanks very much.